was it only 2 years? Okay, I thought it was longer. I just.
And I mean, the thing was, because like even when I wasn't having regular lessons with him, I'd frequently go and play him a program or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, he was an incredibly kind man, wasn't he? I mean, he was a very generous man. He was very loving, actually. The way he approached his students and the way he approached people was just he had a kind of beauty of soul that very few people do, and
It was almost familiar, and actually to this day, some of his students still have quite strong relations with each other. You know, we're on very good terms because we have this shared experience of working with him.
yes, isn't that wonderful? I mean, I don't know. Can you sum up what it was that you gained from him? I mean, we're supposed to be chatting about the exercises, which we'll get to in a second, but obviously there's so much more than just the exercises.
There was, I mean, for me, in a way, the exercises were the smallest part. Yeah, what was it like working with him? Well, I remember the first piece I ever played to him, which was in Chudley Church, that church up the road from here with the amazing stained glass windows, which was in Chudley Church, that church up the road from here with the amazing stained glass windows by Marc Chagall. Have you ever been there?
Didn't know that Paddock Wood had Marc Chagall windows. No.
It's sort of the next village. Next time you come down, when times are a bit normal, I'll take you there because it's absolutely stunning.
Amazing.
They had this great big Bösendorfer Imperial, I think it was, in there, which I believe had been the white piano that was used by Victoria Wood.
Oh.
I believe. And that was in the church, and the first piece I played him, funny enough, he talks about it, was the Liszt B minor. Mm. And of course that was one of the pieces I worked with on you extensively.
Yeah.
And he sort of sat back very carefully and listened and made some, I have to say, fairly cutting comments about my performance, and he sort of deconstructed it and then took me aside afterwards and said that might have been a little bit rough, basically. I'm paraphrasing, a little bit rough, but I feel that you have an expansive enough mind to understand what I'm driving at with this music. And it was a different approach. It was a very almost detached view of the music, a detached way of working, of taking apart musical strands and understanding how things fitted together. Not so that, and he was always very particular about this, not so that one would make a point of these things in performance, but just how, you know, knowing these things just deepens your immersion into the music and therefore informs your performance in a subtle way. So I think one of the other pieces, and I can't remember whether I worked on this with you or not, was the Chopin Barcarolle, which would be one of the first pieces I played for Peter.
I don't remember working with you on that, actually, but I taught the piece so many times. It could very well be that we did look at it. Yeah. What was his take on Chopin? Because he was quite a Chopiniste, wasn't he?
Oh, very much so. And he always went into great detail talking about the specifics of the bel canto school and what exactly was Chopin driving at when he said that he wanted pianists to play like singers, when singers then don't sound how they sound today. So what precisely do we model that on? So there's quite a lot of reading material that he moved in my direction. But I recall that previously I'd worked on the piece with Vladimir Ovchinnikov, who had a very narrative approach to music making, storytelling, absolutely beautiful. But he would talk about imagery at particular moments. Peter just very, very calmly said, I'd like you to play this again, observing the pedal markings strictly.
Yes, okay.
That was it. And it's a strange thing to say, but it completely altered my perception of the work. And I don't know how he knew, because I've spoken to other people and he didn't necessarily give that emphasis to other pianists who worked on the piece with him. But it's to do with the accompaniment figure.
Yes,
the is naked of pedal.
Yes, on the second half.
And it becomes a thematic element, therefore. And it was just small things like that that were able to, you know, radically alter my understanding of a piece, or why, you know, to this day, I take Chopin's pedal markings very seriously, because they reveal inner voices. They don't necessarily always coincide with the bass line. So, you know, stuff like that.
I think that's very interesting. You know, a lot of people ask me about Chopin pedal markings, and most pianists take them with a pinch of salt. And I think there are two ways of looking at it. I'm thinking immediately of the E minor prelude, where you find two pedal markings only, both of which tell you to hold on to the bass note. You know, there's one spot there where instead of well, there are no other pedal markings, but he obviously wanted that A to be caught in the pedal. And you know, people see, oh, well, there's only a pedal marking there, and then there's one here, but there's nothing at the end, there's nothing at the beginning. Therefore, one plays it without pedal, which of course is totally wrong. I mean, you'd do ordinary pedal elsewhere, wouldn't you? And then he's indicated special pedals at those points.
Yes, and I think, you know, what we know from what people wrote about Chopin's playing is that he developed remarkable and new methods of using the pedal.
Yeah.
And I think playing is that he developed remarkable and new methods of using the pedal.
Yeah.
And I think, I might be wrong, I think what that means is that he was one of the earliest pianists to use syncopated pedaling as default.
Mm.
And I think possibly up until that point it wasn't necessarily used as default.
But it's not notated that way, is it? You get the old-fashioned paired and then somewhat later asterisk, and then there's a little gap, which is very ambiguous, and then another paired asterisk.
Yeah. Oh, interestingly, I mean, there was one pianist who seems to do the non-syncopated, but if you listen to that recording of Clara Haskell playing the F minor concerto, in the slow movement, you do notice that there is a breath of air at the end of most of the harmonic pedals.
Ah, aha.
So she puts the gap in, and because she's got such a wonderful legato, it doesn't break the line.
But it's amazing how few pianists actually do that nowadays, maybe in those days. But you know what? I did hear somebody do it fairly recently, and I found it incredibly distracting, because we're not used to hearing that type of pedaling, and rather than making it more beautiful, it sounded a bit pious. It sounded like I, and only I, am doing the pedaling that I see on the page. But see, I interpret that slightly differently. I interpret that pedal marking as being a relic from a, you know, bygone age. And then
you would know from teaching young kids.
Well, I don't teach that many young kids.
No, but you have done.
In the past, yeah.
Yeah, and so have I. And I do remember the sheer difficulty of teaching syncopated pedaling. Young kids, when they're starting at the piano, they just can't get it, and it's really difficult to actually train it in. And then once it becomes your natural default, it's very difficult to not do it.
Yes, that is certainly true. You know, one thing I sometimes do when I'm trying to change somebody's pedal, I get them to do it with the left foot for a little while, so that they have to think, because obviously there's no muscle connection there's no reflex between the left foot and the pedal, the sustaining pedal. And I've often found that a very neat way of helping somebody change a pedaling. It's surprisingly difficult, but
That's funny, yeah.
And then of course they go back to the right foot once they've, you know, found the new pedaling. But that subject in itself is a minefield. But what I'm interested in, some of the things that you said before. One thing in particular about, you'll take a piece to, and I think we could agree that Peter was a guru style teacher, wasn't he? I mean, he was. He had a mystique around him, and he had this status as a guru teacher. I think a lot of people, when they go to a teacher like that, have to forget themselves and just there's a perfectly good English word which I've forgotten now, when you kind of become a disciple of the teacher, and the teacher metaphorically grinds you down into a powder and then builds you up in their image. And you know, his comments on the list sound like he could be coming from that place where this was his view of the piece, and this is what he needed to do with you to get you into his mindset. I don't know how much of that you noticed with him.
Well, it was the list sonata in particular. I mean, is now a thing that I feel really strongly about. He was very particular, as Leslie Howard is, about going back to what the composer actually wrote. And then it's sort of like cleaning an oil painting, stripping away the layers of historic dirt. Yeah. And then you sort of, because it's one of the pieces that is so performed, and you know, the same things that veer away from what's written are also still performed, so you have to remove yourself from tradition. You know, what is it that Liszt actually wrote? Then you have to make complicated decisions about which parts of tradition are there because that was Liszt's norm, or which parts of it are there because other pianists have added them. So certain things like unnecessary accelerandi that happen quite often in the Liszt sonata that aren't actually notated. The music is perfectly intelligible without them, and for me at least, I think if the music's intelligible without them, and it doesn't originate from the composer, no matter that a squillion other pianists have done it before you the other way, that's not a good enough justification for going away from what the composer left us. So that's something I took from Peter with regard to that piece specifically.
Very, very interesting. I mean, we've got to talk about his exercises. I don't know if you know the backstory to how I came to work with him. It was exactly the same. I'll just very, very quickly say, because it's interesting how it connects with yours. It was at a masterclass he was giving in London, and I went and it was, I went backstage afterwards. It was on Opus 110 Beethoven. Went backstage afterwards, and he invited me to Germany to sit in on his classes, which I did with great interest. And it was when he was demonstrating the exercises at the end of the course, it was the last day of the course, I had to walk away. I couldn't actually tolerate what he was doing, because it was the antithesis of everything I believed to be true about piano playing. And I can remember pacing up and down the hallway outside this this room, and getting really angry, thinking, what's all this nonsense? And then afterwards, he invited me, very graciously invited me to come to his studio, and because I was a young, interested young piano teacher and pianist, I was fascinated by what this was all about. So I subjected myself to his influence, as it were, did exactly what he said, and found them completely fascinating. And after a while, and it took me, I guess, a number, maybe even a couple of years, before I figured out what they were all about. Because he never would explain, this one is for this and this one does this. It was always, do this, and he would illustrate, and you just had to do it as a good disciple. I mean, what was your experience of them?
Well, I mean, because I'd never heard of him when I first met him, and the exercises were the beginning of each day before the classes took place, and I thought, the man's a complete crackpot, was the initial response to them, because obviously it was completely at odds with everything I believed to be normal about piano playing.
Yeah.
Complete bot each day before the classes took place, and I thought, the man's a complete crackpot, was the initial response to them, because obviously it was completely at odds with everything I believed to be normal about piano playing.
Yeah.
Completely the opposites. And at times, he wasn't really playing, completely at odds with every initial response to them, because
crackpot.
because obviously it was completely at odds with everything I believed to be normal about piano playing.
Yeah.
Completely the opposites. And at times, he wasn't really very big on explaining what the exercises were for. It's more that now I'm a bit older and I've had other life experiences. I sort of compare it to practice of something like the Ashtanga yoga series, that you just do these repeated movements, and your relationship with the movements changes. You don't perform an asana, you experience an asana, and it's the same sort of thing with the exercises. You don't do them, you experience them. Your body does the thing, and you just contemplate what the body's doing.
That's a very interesting way of thinking about them. That had not occurred to me. Yes, I think that does sum it up very well. Go on, I interrupted you.
So the movements should be, when I've been teaching them before, the first thing I've said to people is, because it's so unfamiliar, is that when you this thing about throwing the hands, the last thing you think about, I think, is accuracy. You get the movement and the reflex first, and the accuracy will come later with repetition. And I've borne this out. I'm not somebody who practices these exercises every day. They're my rescue remedy. I practice them when I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
And they just sort of fix things. So, like, for example, the recording projects I've just done is probably the most technically demanding piece of work I'm ever going to do, is the complete etudes of Adolf von Henselt.
Wonderful.
And I don't have huge hands, and having huge hands really helps with that repertoire. So every now and again I started getting some, not quite pain, I won't let it get that far.
Yeah.
But when you can feel it starting to happen, it's at that point I'll start practicing the exercises, and they just rescue me.
Because
and everything up a bit. And
yeah, I think it's because they put the playing in neutral, don't they? As we've discussed at some point before, it's like the anti-muscular approach to playing the piano. There's no fixed positions. There's no put your hand there and then do this. It's all organic.
It's all about removing preparation. There's no preparation.
No preparation. Absolutely no preparation. And when I practice the exercises now, which I do very rarely, probably for the same reason as you, if I feel like I need a little bit of loosening up, one becomes very aware of any excess muscular activity in the arms, particularly in the hand, and then when you go back to normal playing, or when I go back to normal playing, I feel, oh yes, I was probably overdoing that rather. I didn't need to exert so much. So it just takes it down. It's actually the opposite. It's the antithesis of what you would call regular pianistic training, isn't it? Don't you feel?
Did you ever see Peter doing that rope bridge thing?
But say more.
Well, basically, I remember I was standing next to him. Andrew, let me lower the camera a little bit. So his fingers would be on the keyboard, his hand would be hanging down, his thumb would be hanging loose. That's his default position.
Yeah.
Elbow relaxed, and he'd say, my fingers are a rock, my shoulder is a rock. And standing next to him, Andrew, let me lower the camera a little bit. I remember I was standing next to him. Andrew, let me lower the camera a little bit. So his fingers would be on the keyboard, his hand would be hanging down, his thumb would be hanging loose. That's his default position.
Yeah.
Elbow relaxed, and he'd say, my fingers are a rock, my shoulder is a rock, and everything in between is rope.
Yes, I use that analogy.
Try to push my arm, and the arm would just be completely free. And he said, now try to lift one of my fingers off the key.
Yeah.
And no matter how hard you tried to prise this finger off the key, it wasn't gonna budge.
Yeah.
But the arm was still free.
Yeah. I use that analogy all the time myself. The rope bridge. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he talked about that in his classes too.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, just that if you go through the whole series, the whole sequence of exercises, which I never did, I just chose specific ones that felt relevant to me, because I was never officially his student. I was really just I was already a young professional, and I was just sort of dropping in, and he was very kind and very gracious and very generous with his time. Yeah, I mean, I found I selected a few. Are there any of you? Do you have any favourites?
Yeah, probably the reverse finger.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because it just undoes everything.
Yeah, for people who don't know this, I mean, it's really a 5-finger position with 5, 4, 3, 2. In other words, instead of playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we play 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And because it needs this kind of choreography, what happens is it becomes an anti-finger exercise. It's the antithesis of a finger exercise, and yet it sounds like a finger exercise.
And the other one is the scale exercise, which you use the same finger in every key. So
yes,
C major is 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 pivot, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2. And I remember learning it, and it was like another one of those eureka moments. Actually, was studying with you, which was learning the Moszkowski double note fingerings.
Yes.
I did not know the hand could do that. And it was the same thing, that the ability to play a scale without a lump as the thumb goes under or something, just as a perfect elliptical movement.
Yes.
Absolutely smooth. It's the hand teaching you. It's the hand teaching you what it wants to do.
Yes, well, that because it's a natural movement. It's a natural movement of the body. It's a natural movement of you know, what goes on in the solar system, isn't it? These ellipses. But of course, that's his. Well, it's also in the reverse 5-finger exercise, isn't it? That is a movement. The whole thing. It's nothing to do with this. Well, one of my favourites, I think, I think it's what he called the ricochet, isn't it? That one. Do you like that one? I mean, I think that's just brilliant because it does so many things. You know, the idea of not curling the fingers up and passing the fingers along as one kind of rebounding movement.
Water.
Yes, stone on the water. Yes.
Yeah, and it's just a really good feeling. I mean, one of the things. Do you remember Tomowaki from school, Tomowaki Kimura?
Vaguely.
Because he went on to study with Peter, and he was one of the first students who'd learnt Peter's exercises, who I saw performing afterwards. And I mean, one of the things that you'll notice from anybody who's studied the exercises in depth is that their hands just look beautiful on the piano. The hands just dance on the piano. And the first thing I noticed was that he spent a lot of time playing with his thumb off the keyboard. And that's something that took me quite a long time to get used to.
That's opposite of old school. The old school would say put all the 5 fingers on the keyboard, you know, and have this position where the thumb is you can't see it, but whether I'm just looking for the point of view of people who are viewing this, that would be the old style, wouldn't it? You'd have to keep your thumb on the keyboard, whereas the modern traditions, and Peter, of course, very much part of this, would not do that because, you know, it's to do with this curl versus natural. Peter was actually a flat-fingered approach, really, wasn't he? Wasn't even.
Pretty much, yeah.
You know.
Natural position, yeah.
Yes, yeah, and of course the chord parachute exercise, which I think is a wonder. I remember when I first started doing this, and he would say collapse all the knuckles, and I think, really, collapse all the knuckles? and you know, once you've gone through that exercise. And I mean, that just feels like completely natural, a beautiful feeling. Whereas if you were to go to that chord normally, you'd fix the hand and prepare the hand, wouldn't you? So it's all, again, the opposite of what we're taught. And I have to just tell you this quick story. When I came out of the first lesson I had with him, there was this advertising sneakers down by South Ken Station, and the caption emblazoned there was "Everything you know is wrong." And
that's amazing.
That is like an omen, a sign from above that you know, perhaps there was more to piano playing than I had inherited, or another side to it, or kind of the shadow side of it, as it were. Fascinating. Yeah. Is there anything else we want to just cover before we sign off with this?
I don't know really. We've talked in some depth about the exercises and what they do.
Yeah. Well, you know,
and the thing is, if we could just sort of ramble on forever, couldn't we?
It just occurs to me what we could do now is we could just wrap up now, because we've probably got a good chunk of you know, YouTube length video that people will watch, and then if people like it, we can do it again, and maybe we could both be sitting at the keyboard and just illustrating things that from Peter's legacy, because he left a huge legacy behind, and the piano world feels a lot poorer without him. I can say that. I'm sure you feel the same.
Well, I do. I mean, I went to his funeral, and there was a few other pianists that I knew from the time I was studying with him who were there, and it did feel like passing of an era.
Yeah.
Very emotional. It did feel like passing of an era.
Yeah.
Very who were there, and it did feel like passing of an era.
Yeah.
Very emotional. Very emotional day.
Yes, I can.
I don't think there's anybody else teaching in quite. Not that there ever was anybody else teaching in quite the same way as Peter, but you know, we who studied with him do our best to try to keep his legacy alive. And what's interesting is that each of us have a slightly different version of what that legacy is. And like I said to you at the beginning, the exercises are a thing that I experienced, but they're not what I remember most clearly about my lessons with him.
Yeah.
But other people are saying, well, the exercises totally revolutionized their understanding of their relationship with the piano. No, he revolutionized my relationship with music itself.
Yes, well, that's fantastic, isn't it? That's the mark of a great teacher. That it's not a one-size-fits-all. You take from them what you need and what you need at the time. That's important. Yes, I mean we remember him with great admiration and with great fondness, and his legacy absolutely does live on. And he was one of a kind. I can't imagine anybody else ever coming along who would be like Peter. Yeah.
No, I think the only part there's something about him that brings to mind somebody like Krishnamurti.
Yes, Guru.
Guru, with the same sort of humour. Because I mean, one thing that people tend not to talk about with Peter is that he was hilarious.
I don't know that I knew that side of him, actually.
I mean, his sense of humour was bang on. I mean, he would have me in stitches sometimes, and his his sort of impish caricatures and stuff. He was just brilliant fun.
I didn't know that. I don't know that side of him. Well, Danny, why don't we leave it there and then revisit this subject maybe at some point later on. Fab. Well, look, thanks so much for joining me in this, and I will get in touch with you soon, and we'll arrange another one.
Что тебе надо думать? Он на себе так думает просто. Маленький. Я бы себе больной, я всегда так говорил. Кранка. Кранка. Нет, нет, типа нет, показывать никому все писать. Это значит. Это что? Это что-то. Нет. Нет. Вот это и есть оно, нет, понял уже. Нет, деньги мне не за это, деньги. А как? Что ты хочешь такого? Не понял. Нет, это. Это он себе думал. Нет, да.
Как выйти из тупика? На самом деле, вот это чувство отсутствия ясной стратегической цели, оно нам всем
of dopamine or hypersensitivity haloperidol. The use of haloperidol in this the patient caused an hyperkinesis and speech restoration, deepening our knowledge of physiological and biochemical regulation of motor acts will help solving the problems of pathogenetic therapy, hyperkinesis.
Das ist vollkommen frei und ohne, nicht wie eine Marionette ist das, ja.
It's all right.
Wieder da, siehst du?
снизу.
снизу, да, просто.
1,5.
Aha.
1,5.
Ага. И на первый палец пойди наверх.
5.
Aha.
1,5.
Ага. И на первый палец пойди наверх. Нет, вместо пятого первый сыграй.
Ja, wie ist das?
Ага.
Guck mal. Mach das.
И на пятый поменять.
Ah,
Ага.
like that.
Guck mal, das.
Ага. Ну просто снизу. Не сверху бери, а снизу. Так, на движение.
Aha.
Weiter runter.
So here it could be 4, then
Ага. Ну подумай, что эллипс, который снизу поднимается.
кто понимается?
Эллипс, который снизу идет.
Ага.
Сейчас вниз. А, лучше.
Ja, nur schön viel. Schau mal den Finger dazu. 2, 2, 5. Nicht. Komm mal her.
Wow.
Ich suche meine Aufgabe, das sind alle meine Finger deswegen reingestellt, kannst du aufschreiben. Nein, in Bewegung. 2, 2, 1, 5. Gehst du rum, ja? Na, du machst so. Ich mach. Das geht alle Dinge. Löbt sich. Na. 5, 2, 2. 5, 2, 1, 5, 2.
5, 2,
Первый.
5, 2.
Пятый, второй.
5, 2. Ah.
На втором заканчивается. Четвертый, третий, второй. На втором заканчивается. Когда ты снимаешь руку,
Ja.
то опускай ее тоже вниз. Ich kann das weiter erklären.
Man kann doch viel schöner diese Finger, das findest du nicht?
Ja, ja.
Schau mal.
Можешь сыграть?
Schau mal, ne? Ja. Sehr schön.
Das bisschen Самое важное, die Hauptsache ist, dass es immer weitergeht, ja? Dass es immer in Bewegung bleibt.
Ja.
Deine Ellipse beschreiben.
Alle drin reingeschickt. Wie der Urtext darf,
речь. Ну, нервный, чокнутый, нервный.
Hello everyone, in this exercise we move from place to place, focusing on weight into each finger. At the beginning of each round, there is an initial turn and then the sequence begins. Your focus is your body. You hang on the resting notes, monitoring your hand position, softness of wrists, looseness of elbows, and relaxation of the unused hand. For these coming exercises, I do recommend sitting on a Pilates ball. There is something else we need to discuss. There is an element to Peter's exercises which goes beyond the keyboard and the fingers. As you hang off the key on the long notes, you are focusing on weight distribution as normal. However, you also have the unique opportunity to listen to the harmonics and sound waves from the long notes. I am playing through this exercise too fast, but for the purposes of this video, in reality and in your practice, you should hold on to the long notes for at least 10 seconds each. This develops the inner ear and enables pianists to focus on the harmonics of the piano, something pianists rarely do. If you happen to have a singing bowl, listen to the sounds within a long note. It is the same principle. As always,
Как это singing bowl? There is singing bowl. Oh, это вот. Ню-ню-ню-ню. Кто такой? Ладно, где?